Chapter 11: The Holistic Neurosomatic Circuit. But there is also in us an aspiration for the mastery of nature. Health, strength, duration, happiness and ease, liberation from suffering are part of the physical transformation which evolution is called upon to realize. Sri Aurobindo, The Future Evolution of Man. The resurrection of the body need not be postponed until after death. It can happen at any moment. This is a copy of Crowley's inspired drawing. For its original, see the Book of Thoth or study his tarot deck. The beast with 4 heads represents the antique circuits. The hedonic laid-back newt is neurosomatic rapture. The serpent is the rising of the Kundalini serpent, a Hindu metaphor for imprinting the Circuit 5 neurosomatic bliss control. The word psychosomatic has been around long enough to be generally understood. Unfortunately, it is another semantic spook. The concept of psyche or soul was borrowed from the theologians who, being bankrupt, are in no position to lend anything. What we know and experience, our tunnel reality, is what registers on the brain and nervous system. The phenomena of faith healing, regeneration, rejuvenation, bliss, ecstasy, rapture, etc. have been occurring for many thousands of years in all known cultures. In the pre-scientific language of yesterday's psychology, we would refer to such events as psychosomatic. In our deliberately modernistic and almost sci-fi jargon, we prefer to call them neurosomatic. The neurosomatic circuit of the brain is much more recent than the antique circuits previously discussed. It does not manifest in all human beings and appears late in life, usually to those who do activate and imprint it. Temporary neurosomatic consciousness can be acquired by A. the yoga practice of pranayama breathing, and B. for those who can handle it, by ingestion of cannabis drugs such as hashish and marijuana, which trigger neurotransmitters that activate this circuit. Of the former device, pranayama, Aleister Crowley, certainly the most skeptical of all mystics, writes forcefully, "For mind and body alike, there is no purgative like pranayama, no purgative like pranayama. For mind and body alike, for mind and body alike, there is no purgative like pranayama. Pranayama, yeah, for mind and body alike, there is no purgative, no purgative, no purgative. For mind and body alike, no purgative like pranayama." If this is not emphatic enough, Crowley adds elsewhere, "Pranayama is notably useful in quieting the emotions and appetites. Digestive troubles in particular are very easy to remove in this way. It purifies both the body and the mind and should be practiced certainly never less than 1 hour daily by the serious student." To which he adds a footnote, emphatically, it is impossible to combine pranayama properly performed with emotional thought, second circuit reflexes. It should be resorted to immediately at all times during life when calm is threatened. This is very strong stuff from the mystic who filled his books with jokes and jeers and who always told the students not believe me, but don't believe me. About pranayama, for once in his life, Crowley was serious. In the experience of this author, pranayama will remove all forms of depression, including profound grief and bereavement. It will soothe anger and remove resentments. It seems beneficial to all minor health problems and occasionally major health problems. Hindus, who are professionals at pranayama, claim a great deal more, such as immunity to pain of all sorts, samadhi, union with God, levitation, etc. Most notably, pranayama creates neurosomatic turn-on, sensory enrichment, sensual bliss, perceptual delight, and a general laid-back hedonic high. Similar effects are produced by voluntary isolation in a little tank by zero gravity. The astronaut's mystical experiences are all of this neurosomatic variety, and for the judicious or lucky cannabis drugs, as said above. Negative neurosomatic circuit effects are experienced by amateur yogis, by many potheads, and by a large number of schizophrenics. The neurosomatic feedback loop in these unfortunate cases reverses the above description. Sensory experience becomes unpleasant, any sound or touch is painful, sensuality turns into acute discomfort with the entire body, perceptions warp into nightmare, and general anxiety is imprinted. Light is particularly terrifying and painful, often associated with hell or with mind control manipulated by unscrupulous enemies. Gopi Krishna, a Hindu bureaucrat who took up yoga originally only for health reasons, was abruptly catapulted. Gopi Krishna, a Hindu bureaucrat who took up yoga originally only for health reasons, was abruptly catapulted into a negative neurosomatic state for several years. All sensations were so painful that he many times thought he would die. The details in his autobiography, Kundalini, are pathetic and sound much like schizophrenia. He came out of this finally, entered the positive neurosomatic state, and has been writing blissful books about the perfection of the all, typical of this circuit ever since. Nikola Tesla, the Yugoslav genius, went through the same hell or schizoid state without yoga in his teens. He came out of the horrors with the scientific theory of alternating currents worked out, a belief in extrasensory perception, a superhuman memory, and a streak of visionary humanitarianism that led him into continuous conflicts with the corporations that finances more than 100 major electrical inventions. Most shamans and many mystics have been through similar negative to positive neurosomatic sensitization. Christian scientists called it chemicalization. St. John of the Cross called it poetically the dark night of the soul. Kabbalists call it crossing the abyss. In Kazanzaki's The Odyssey, a modern sequel, Odyssey sees a statue which seems to him urgently meaningful. The statue was Kazanzaki's symbol for the evolution of these circuits, which have not been known more or less in various symbolisms for a few thousand years. For example, the 7 souls of the Egyptians, the 10 lights of the Kabbalists, etc. The Kazanzaki statue shows an animal, Circuit 1, a warrior above the animal, Circuit 2, a scholar above the warrior, Circuit 3, a lover, Circuit 4, a face in agony, chemicalization, the dark night of the soul, the crossing of the abyss, which equals the entry to Circuit 5, the hard way, a face in bliss, successful Circuit 5 re-imprinting, and a man turning into pure spirit, Circuit 7. Circuit 6 is missing in the schemata, as Circuit 4 is missing in Jung, and everything above Circuit 3 is missing in Carl Sagan. Some lucky souls jump to Circuit 5 bliss without passing through the horrors of chemicalization and the dark night of the soul. The neurosomatic circuit is polymorphous perverse in Freud's unappetizing terminology. This merely means that the nervous system itself, taken over as driver, is now directing the rest of the body. Every act becomes an orgasm, said Aleister Crowley, giving his own tantric emphasis to the polymorphous nature of this circuit. The lives of the saints are full of stories which seem miracles to the four-circuited majority, or are rejected as lies, hoaxes, yarns by the three-circuited dogmatic rationalists, but which seem perfectly normal from the viewpoint of five-circuited polymorphous consciousness. The saint says he is in rapture and full of gratitude to God for giving him such a feast for dinner as plain bread and water. Of course, many a pothead will understand that degree of neurosomatic rapture. The guru comes into the room and his bioenergy has such a charge that a cripple jumps up and is healed, The cripple merely acquired neurosomatic turn-on by contact, as some people get contact high when others are on drugs. The firewalkers in many shamanic traditions walk on the fire, as they tell inquiring anthropologists, to prove their control over the spirit, to demonstrate to themselves and others that they have achieved high-quality neurosomatic tuning. One faith healer told the present author, "Most people die of adrenaline poisoning. In our terminology, most people have too much first circuit anxiety and second circuit territorial pugnacity for their own good. They are literally struggling for survival, as no other animals do, despite Darwin. Most animals simply play most of the time, solve problems of survival when they have to, or die of not solving the problems. Only humans are conscious of struggling and hence worried and depressed about the game of life." The faith healer went on, "What cures them is realizing that I'm not afraid. That is, contact with a fifth circuit personality, a person who controls his or her own circuit to adrenaline trips, can be a catalyst, throwing the sufferer outward into a personal fifth circuit experience. The avant-garde 20% of the population, due to the consciousness movement, already understands every wild idea in the last few pages. They have had enough neurosomatic experience to know that they were once totally robotized, as most people still are, and are knowingly engaged in acquiring more neurosomatic know-how. When this reaches 51% of the population, a major historic revolution will have occurred, as profound as a life extension revolution. In McLuhan's terms, the fifth circuit is nonlinear and global. That is, it is not limited by the one thing at a time sequences of the semantic circuit. It thinks in gestalts. This is why it is so often connected with intuition, which is a way of thinking between and around data points on the perceptual screen, sensing what total field the points must be part of. The great musician has developed a remarkable feedback between fifth circuit gestalting and the third circuit function of coding such coherent structures into the inspired symbolism of music. Music always leads to some right brain activity in listeners, and the fifth circuit is almost certainly located in the right brain hemisphere. Beethoven, we remember, was left-handed. Since the left hand is neurologically linked to the polymorphous right brain, one might say he was genetically inclined to right brain activities, that is, to sensing coherent wholes, to plunging into neurosomatic bliss almost at will, and to sensory sensual raptness and rapture. Everybody knows that the Sixth Symphony is pantheistic, but whether Beethoven was an ideological pantheist or not, that way of responding to nature is normal and natural right brain circuit 5 functioning. That is, anybody on the fifth circuit will talk like a pantheist, whether or not he has developed a philosophy about pantheism. The miracle of Beethoven is not that he felt the universe that way. A few thousand fifth circuit types throughout history have also felt and sensed nature that way, but that he mastered the third circuit art of music with such skill that he could communicate such experiences, which is precisely what the ordinary mystic cannot do. The neurosomatic circuit probably began to appear around 30,000 years ago. That is the conclusion of Barbara Honegger, who has made a profound study of European cave paintings, coming to the conclusion that many of them show exercises to increase right brain activity similar to those still used in surviving shamanic and yogic traditions. This fifth circuit is bonded into the right cortex and neurologically linked to the limbic first circuit system and the genitalia. These neural links explain the sexual metaphor of Kundalini, or serpent energy, used to describe this circuit in systems as varied as Indian Tantra, Gnosticism, and Voodoo, and the Chinese yin yang, male-female energies associated with it. Prolonged sexual play without orgasm always triggers some circuit 5 consciousness. It is quite easy to determine if the fifth circuit has been activated successfully or not. How often does a person go to a doctor? If a mind researcher is glowing rather than grayish, bouncy rather than craggy, if he or she has a sparkle, and if he or she virtually never goes to a doctor, the neurosomatic circuit has been mastered. As Mary Baker Eddy once wrote, thereby making herself hugely unpopular with those who love to talk of matters mystical but have no empirical knowledge, the Word was made flesh. Divine truth must be known by its effects on the body as well as on the mind. There is no tribe known to anthropology which doesn't have at least one neurosomatic technician, shaman. Large-scale outbursts of neurosomatic consciousness have occurred frequently in all the major historical periods, usually being stamped out quickly by the local branch of the Inquisition or the AMA. Other outbursts have been co-opted and diluted. As we read in the New Testament, and when he had called into him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely you have received, freely give. It may or may not have happened exactly like that, as Mark Twain would say. There might be a few stretchers in there, but something like this, however much the evangelists may exaggerate it, must have happened to account for Christianity's rapid triumph over other, but probably less effective, systems of opening the Fifth Circuit. Mithraism, the Eleusinian cult at Athens, the Dionysian cults, etc., all had age-old shamanic techniques for inducing neurosomatic rapture. Christianity at first seems to have been superior in creating neurosomatic control. In St. Paul's metaphor, the old Adam, circuits 1 to 4, got bleached out and the new Adam, circuit 5, took over as the center of consciousness and self-government. In another metaphor, the body became the flexible clay and the awakened, illuminated brain became the sculpture. In general, Fourth Circuit problems take the form of guilt. I cannot do what I am supposed to do. Third Circuit problems take the form of perplexity. I cannot understand how I got into this mess, or how to get out of it, or what is expected of me. Second Circuit problems take the form of bullying or cowardice. I will force them, or I will surrender and let them force me. First Circuit problems take the form of body symptoms. I feel rotten all over, gradually centering in under enough stress on one acute disabling system. Fifth Circuit neurosomatic consciousness bleaches out all these problems at once. The disappearance of First Circuit physical illnesses only seems more miraculous than the transcendence of Second Circuit emotionalism, Third Circuit perplexity, and Fourth Circuit guilt. It is the Cartesian mind-body dualism that makes us think of such First Circuit physical cures as somehow stranger or more spooky than any rapid improvement on the other circuits. One of the intents of our terminology is precisely to transcend that Cartesian dualism, making all the circuits equally comprehensible within one context. The robotized rationalist fears and resents Circuit 5 rapture and its holistic intuitive faculties, just as the robotized emotionalist fears and resents Circuit 3 reason. Thus, when the neurosomatic circuit feedback begins to function and the mutated Circuit 5 person tries to describe his or her rapture and at oneness, the rationalist hastily mutters that this is merely subjective. Misery is merely subjective too, but that doesn't keep it from hurting. The neurosomatic skill of transmuting all experience so that one is high and happy in a situation where the four-circuited majority would be miserable is worth learning for the very simple, egotistic reason that it's more fun to be happy than to be in agony. It is also socially beneficial because, as Tim Leary often said, you can't do good until you feel good. Just as misery loves company, the high and happy want everybody else to be high and happy. The first lesson the Fifth Circuit adept has to learn is to control this upsurge of altruism and not make a nuisance of oneself by trying to force everybody to be happy. The rationalist is even more alarmed by the results of prolonged Fifth Circuit bliss, which includes the ability to heal a wide variety of diseases both in oneself and in others. Even the well-documented current research on endorphins, which gives us the beginning of a neurochemical explanation of how such healings operate, is regarded with discomfort or hostility by the more robotized rationalists. It all sounds metaphysical and therefore it cannot exist. There is nothing supernatural about the Fifth Circuit. It merely appears supernatural by comparison to the earlier circuits, but the Third Circuit, of which the rationalist is so proud, undoubtedly appears supernatural when it first appeared. The Egyptians attributed speech and writing, Third Circuit functions, to divine intervention by the god Thoth. The First Circuit, like the earlier circuits, is just another evolutionary mutation, necessary to us as we move toward a more complex neurosocial level. It's just like ordinary life, except that you're always a foot above the ground, says an old Zen proverb. This floating aspect of the Fifth Circuit is preparing us for extraterrestrial migration. One of the most interesting neurosomatic adepts in all history, from the viewpoint of the present theory, was Mary Baker Eddy. Precisely because Mrs. Eddy was fundamentally naive and unaware of most of philosophy, she never realized that she cannot speak or write about the ineffable. She therefore wrote about it at length. If her writings are hard to decipher, if they often sound like the ravings of a disordered mind, Aleister Crowley's description of mystic writings including his own, they also have astonishing lucidity. For instance, she knew and wrote with total clarity that illness is fear and love is its cure. Most psychologists are just beginning to comprehend that today, over 100 years later. Perfect love casteth out fear, and that is how neurosomatic awakening cures disease. As Mrs. Eddy told one inquirer, love, love, love. That's all you have to know to be a healer. 60 years later, unheeded by most of his profession, a Scottish psychiatrist, Ian Suttie, wrote that the physician's love heals the patient. Another quote from Mrs. Eddy is appropriate at this point. When understanding changes, we shall gain the reality of life, the control of soul over sense. This must be the climax before harmonious and immortal man is obtained and his capabilities revealed. To the ordinary scientifically educated reader, this is metaphysical gibberish. Let us try to retranslate it into our own neurological metaphors. When the brain develops its full potentials, we shall gain a new view of life and the control of neurosomatic bliss over lower circuit guilts, perplexities, emotions, and body symptoms. This is evolutionarily scheduled to occur before Sixth Circuit evolutionary awareness and physical immortality are achieved. We suggest that Mrs. Eddy, having activated a large part of the right brain hemisphere, was able to think in gestalts as well as serving as transmitter of neurosomatic healing to others. She was looking down the DNA highway to the scientific breakthroughs of the decade in which we now live. Many have turned on the neurosomatic circuit due to prolonged illness, especially if they grow impatient with doctors and resort to self-medication and or faith healing. The bathroom of Nietzsche, according to Stefan Zweig, looked like a pharmacy shop due to the large number of drugs and medicines with which the philosopher treated his chronic migraines. Gurdjieff employed cocaine, hashish, and yoga techniques, probably including pranayama, to treat the incessant and increasing pains resultant from his war wounds and 2 car accidents. The harshness of these two philosophers, their contempt for ordinary human suffering, their visions of the superhuman state beyond emotion and pain, all probably derived from neurosomatic turn-ons alternating with acute pain. That is, they experienced the whole of evolution from the lower circuits to the full development of neurosomatic bliss and were expressing chiefly contempt for their own relapses into less than blissful consciousness. In the East, the control of the neurosomatic circuit is known as dhyana or Zen. The state is sometimes called Buddha mind or Buddha body. To the ancient Greeks, where rituals to achieve it with psychedelic drugs were performed yearly at Eleusis, those who accomplished the ritual successfully were called djinns, twice born. The metaphor lingers in the born-again terminology of charismatic Christianity and is symbolized by the myth of the resurrection of the body. Freud recognized the state vaguely as the oceanic experience. Gurdjieff calls this circuit the magnetic center. Faith healers and adepts of a few yogic schools seem to live in neurosomatic consciousness permanently. Most who have achieved it at all tend to have it only in flashes, as noted by Ezra Pound. For a flash, for an hour, then agony, then an hour. This parody, this condition of neurosomatic mind-body peace should be considered a new brain circuit toward which all humanity is evolving, slowly and painfully, out of mammalian antic circuits. This progression from primate emotion to post-hominid tranquility, from man to superman, is the next step that mystics forever talk of. You can hear it in most of Beethoven's later major compositions. As mentioned before, governmental brainwashers are generally too puritanical to handle or manhandle the sociosexual circuit and content themselves with mind-washing and brain programming on the biosurvival, emotional, and semantic circuits, while outlaw bands like the SLA or Mansonoids go further and re-imprint the sociosexual circuit also. It is necessary to note that some cults presently active on this backward planet go even further than that and engage in neurosomatic brainwashing. A permanent neurosomatic circuit can only be imprinted by prolonged practice of one of the yogic, tantric, or related sciences, and perhaps good genes, good environments, and good luck generally. Neurosomatic brainwashing, the most powerful form of robotization, consists in temporary activation of the neurosomatic circuit by the brainwasher, together with assurances that only the brainwasher, or the God who acts through him, can turn on this circuit. For full effect, this is of course preceded by normal brainwashing. The victim is first isolated from his or her previous environment and trained to hook the biosurvival circuit onto the guru and or the ashram or commune. The emotional circuit is bent and broken by continuous attacks upon status, ego, until the only emotional security left is found in total submission to the group reality island. The re-infantilized victim is then ready to imprint any semantic circuitry desired, from ESU to Krishna to People's Temple, etc. The sociosexual circuit can then easily be programmed for celibacy, for free love, or for whatever sexual game the guru has selected. Then, and only then, the neurosomatic buttons are pushed and ecstasy is given to the subject by the guru. Marjo Gortner, a longtime practitioner of this science, commented ironically in a film made after abandoning it for a different career. The marks never realized they could do it, push the neurosomatic buttons for themselves. They all think they need me jacking them off. Gortner is nowadays unusually honest. The average charismatic insists that the victims can never learn to do it for themselves. One of the greatest historical practitioners of this neuroscience was Hassani Sabah, who used relatively simple techniques, including evidently a time-release capsule invented by the Sufi College of Wisdom in Cairo. As I describe Hassan's technique, based on historical records in my novel, The Trick Top Hat, two young candidates dine with Hassan. The food is laced with a time-release capsule. When asleep, the candidates are taken to Hassan's famous Garden of Delights. The capsule had released a heavy dose of opium and they were quite thoroughly unconscious and unaware of their surroundings. The garden, officially known as the Garden of Delights, covered several acres. Here, candidates were prepared for admission to the Order of the Assassins. They were to become the most feared and legendary professional killers in history. But here also, in the same garden, were prepared candidates for admission to the Brotherhood of Light, the Illuminati. The candidates, in fact, were prepared the same way. They themselves selected, unknown to themselves, which order they would enter, the political assassins or the mystic Illuminati. Both the young men were conveyed into the Garden of Delights and placed several acres apart from each other. In a short time, the second stage of the time-release capsule began to work. Cocaine was released into their bloodstreams, thereby overwhelming the traces of the soporific opium and causing them to awaken full of energy and zest. At the same time as they woke, hashish also began to be released, so they saw everything with exceptional clarity and all colors were jewel-like, brilliant, divinely beautiful. A group of extremely comely and busty young ladies, imported from the most expensive brothel in Cairo, sat in a circle around each of the young candidates, playing flutes and other delicately sweet musical instruments. "Welcome to heaven," they sang as the awakening men gazed about them in wonder. "By the magic of the holy Lord Hassan, you have entered paradise while still alive." And they fed them paradise apples, oranges, far sweeter and stranger than the earth apples they had known before, and they showed them the animals of paradise, imported from as far away as Japan in some cases, creatures far more remarkable than those ordinarily seen in Afghanistan. "This is heaven," the first young man exclaimed in ecstasy. "Great is Allah, and great is the wise Lord Hassan Sabah." But 20 acres away, surrounded by similar lovely ladies and other wonders, the second young man merely gazed about him, smiled in contentment, and said nothing. And then, in both cases, the houris of paradise, as promised in the Quran, began to dance, and as they danced, they discarded one by one each of their 7 veils. As the veils were thrown off, more and more hashish was released from the capsules, and the young men saw with greater clarity, felt with deeper intensity, experienced beauty and sexual joy in a way completely unknown in their previous earth lives. Then, as each young man sat entranced by the beauty and wonder of heaven, the houris finished the dance and nude and splendid as they were, rushed forward in a bunch like flowers cast before the wind. And some fell at the candidate's feet and kissed his ankles. Some kissed knees or thighs. One sucked rapidly at his penis. Others kissed the chest and arms and belly. A few kissed eyes and mouth and ears. And as he was smothered in this hashish-intensified avalanche of love, the lady working on his penis sucked, and he climaxed in her mouth as softly and slowly and blissfully as a single snowflake falling. In a little while, there was no more hashish being released, and more opium began to flow into the bloodstream. The young candidates slept again, and in their torpor they were removed from the Garden of Delights and returned to the banquet hall of the Lord Hassan. There they awoke. "Truly," the first exclaimed, "I have seen the glories of heaven, as foretold in Quran. I have no more doubts. I will trust Hassan Sabah and love him and serve him." "You are accepted for the Order of Assassins," said Hassan solemnly. "Go at once to the green room to meet your superior in the order." When this candidate had left, Hassan turned to the second, asking, "And you?" "I have discovered the first matter, the medicine of metals, the elixir of life, the stone of the philosophers, true wisdom and perfect happiness," said he, quoting the alchemical formula, "and it is inside my own head." Hassan Sabah grinned broadly. "Welcome to the Order of the Illuminati," he said, laughing. Hassan Sabah was not the first or last student of the ways in which sexuality can be transmuted into Fifth Circuit rapture. Further to the east, there were tantric schools within Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, which taught techniques by which prolongation of the genital embrace could explode into dramatic brain change. In the West, underground cults of Gnostics, Illuminati, alchemists, and witches kept similar techniques as closely guarded secrets, for if the Holy Inquisition ever learned of such practices, the participants would be denounced as devil worshippers and burned at the stake. In our own time, there has been a revolutionary upsurge of these ancient neurological secrets with an admixture of more modern techniques. Tantric teachers are available in many cities. Masters and Johnson used quasi-tantric practices to treat sexual dysfunctions. As early as 1968, a poll by McLaughlin showed that 85% of the pot smokers in the country said their chief interest in the weed was its function as enhancer of erotic sensation. Vibrators and other sexual toys proliferate, gays come out of the closet, philosophers of a culture without repression become bestsellers. Saul Kent, a writer of medical science for general audiences, has even suggested that electronic sexual surrogates can and will be manufactured in the near future. Your own Marilyn Monroe doll. Instead of joining Tom Wolfe and the Puritans in throwing up our hands in horror at such an idea, let us consider it for a moment. Let us see if we can peek outside our imprinted conditioned reality tunnel. If a sexual android is possible in 2005 or 2050 or whenever, why not a totally programmed sexual environment? Let us call this, in memory of Hermann Hesse, the magic theater. We start with what is concurrently available in high-priced brothels in the hedonic Sunbelt section of America. Massage, a first-circuit tranquilizer, has all the advantages of the opiates without being habit-forming. Our magic theater, then, would include computerized body relaxers and energizers better than current massage techniques. Porn movies are available for stimulation in the better brothels. Our magic theater would have them in 3D on all four walls, obviously. Marijuana and stimulants like cocaine or speed are available in brothels everywhere. Our magic theater would have better chemical rapture agents. One can go on adding details according to personal fantasy until one has created a room in which bliss can be extended in all dimensions indefinitely. A strange thing has happened in constructing the cyberneticized brothel. We seem to have gone beyond sex to something that might be called meta-sex. While specific genital pleasure might still be fun, it is hardly as important as it seemed to us before we came into the multidimensional pleasure dome, where all senses are stimulated to ecstasy. And the most peculiar thing about this bawdy science fiction projection is that we don't even need to build a magic room. It is built into our brains already. We have been describing the positive neurosomatic consciousness, which Freud called polymorphous perversity in one of his Puritan moods, and the oceanic experience in one of his mystical moments. This is what the neurosomatically turned on brain feels like. In alchemy, this was known as the multiplication of the first matter, or the philosopher's gold, which was unlike ordinary gold in that it could not be spent or used up, since it perpetually multiplied and renewed itself. It is the third eye of the Illuminati tradition, which transforms all it sees, the eye of which Jesus speaks in his gnomic aphorism. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body will be full of light.